Okay, Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum to you all, online and at campus. My name is Lien Djie. My origin is Chinese, but I was born and raised in the Netherlands. Chinese from Indonesia, by the way. So I'm actually a sort of a product of the Dutch colonization, because that was the reason why my parents chose for the Netherlands. So I was born and raised in the Netherlands. I studied at the UvA, University of Amsterdam, educational science, and later on in my life, I worked as a group trainer. And later on in my life, I decided, when my third child went to school, I decided to study again. And I became psychosocial counselor. I have my own private practice in Amsterdam, aimed at Muslim women with all sorts of issues. They come to me. And these past few years, I've become fascinated by the Islamic psychology, because I'm a revert. After, at the end of my studies, I found Islam is my way of life. And since then, I've been searching for the best of both worlds, really, because I do believe that science, true science, is actually coming from the same source as the revelation. So I try in my work to incorporate both. I'm really happy that you, as a student organization, pay attention to mental health. Mental Health Awareness Day is a means to just try and break the taboos, get into conversation with each other, normalize questions or issues around mental health. So let me start and share my screen. Bismillah. Okay, is this visible for you all? Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So shortly, I'll be looking at what does the Quran actually say about mental health. We'll be looking at a model of who we are as mankind and the Quranic perspective on the dynamics of the nafs. We'll briefly touch on the subject because it's a large field. And we'll be looking at the end to some practical tips and things you can really take home, inshallah. And that's the mental health kit. And that's actually something that I didn't invent myself, but was as an idea really invented by a 9th century polymath, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, one of the, actually he's not that famous, but he was a very high scholar, high learned scholar in the 9th century, so very long time ago, at the beginning of the Islamic Golden Age. Some of his works are recently being rediscovered, because actually he was known in his time for his geographic maps. He was very good at drawing maps. But he was, as most polymath in that time, also a doctor. He was also a psychologist. And back then, a doctor meant that you were a doctor for body and mind, that was not separated like in these days. So he actually wrote a very famous book. He wrote a famous book with 2 parts, one on the body and one on the mind. And the part on the mind is translated into English by Dr. Rania Awad. You may have heard of her. She's very famous in the United States, and she does really groundbreaking work as far as Islamic psychology is concerned. So the idea actually that Abu Zayd al-Balkhi introduced was to develop for yourself a mental health kit, like we all have the first aid kit, right? You have at home the betadine and the all the necessary stuff when you cut your hand or something happens. You know, most of us do have such an emergency kit. But he actually introduced the idea of developing a mental health kit, first aid kit as well. And especially you do that at the moment that actually you're okay. you're all right, you're balanced, you're doing actually quite all right, that's the moment where you should be working on your mental health first aid kit. Because in the middle of a panic attack, it's really hard to come up with good ideas. So that was really a revolutionary idea, which he introduced so many centuries ago. So we have a huge history to be very, very proud of if we're talking about mental health. So to start with the term mental health, actually the Quran doesn't speak of that term. The Quran speaks of illness of the heart, or we could say health of the heart, health or illnesses of the heart. And this already shows a huge paradigm shift. Because if you talk about mental health, it refers, if you would speak with gestures, you would automatically gesture towards your head, right? Mental health, we all point towards our brain. But the Quran speaks of illness or uh, health of the heart. On mankind, on our health, on our well-being, is really very different and opposite than the secular view on who we are as humankind and what our core is. From a secular perspective or mainstream psychological, it's actually seen that our brain is our core, right? So there is a lot of research going on, brain research, which is fascinating. We do need our brain, of course, but the Islamic view, the Quranic view, sees our brain more as the machine that has to, work, it has to produce, it has to fulfill, it has to obey, so to speak. But the core of who we are is our heart. And we have so many indications of that in the Quran and Sunnah. And for example, this ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, where it's stated that there is a sickness in their hearts. And then Allah Ta'ala speaks here about the munafiqun. And really not any mention of that something's wrong with their brains. Yeah, so this is really a very fundamental difference right away. So just a brief introduction on one of the many attempts nowadays to grasp who we are and to try to put us as a species, as a creation into a model is actually one of is this model. It's under development by Dr. Professor Khalili. He was one of my teachers at Rifa University, International University. So there's a disclaimer, like this is not something finished, or he's still working on it with his students. But he actually taught us with the help of this model. And as you can see, the qalb, which is the heart, is actually the biggest piece of this model, right? Maybe it's a bit overwhelming, all the boxes and all the stuff, but you can actually focus on the biggest circle. It's the qalb, which is stated as center of our personality. And there is a part of that qalb which is mentioned as aql. Of course, it's not that separate, like a limb or something, but it's part here in the picture. It's part of the qalb. And if we look at the Quran doesn't speak of the aql, but it speaks of the faculty of being able to think. So you find the word yaqilun, so in the ayat. So it's actually a potential of our heart. Very interesting, because if we would translate it into English, aql, then we see the word intellect. And of course, there goes our hand again up towards, pointing towards our brain, right? If we mention the word intellect, we think about our brain. So here is actually, there is mention of the brain within our heart, so to speak, or the intelligence of our heart. Yeah? So the aql is referring to the intelligence of our heart. And this heart is really very volatile. It can move up and down. and it moves up and down many times a day, and it can move. If it moves upwards, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards the higher self, so to speak, then we become automatically closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and more in submission to His will. But it can also move downwards towards our lower self, the demanding self, which is under influence of the waswasa of shaitan. And then we're talking about our nafs al-ammara. I'll be talking about that in a minute, so don't worry about all the different terminology. So, but here is just the main thing you can understand from this picture is that our qalb is really the center of our personality, um, and that heart is very quite vulnerable in the sense that it can change many times a day. That's why our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had one dua which he mentioned maybe the most often, and probably many of you have learned it by heart. It's Ya muqallib al-qulub thabbit qalbi ala dinik, right? So, oh, turner of our hearts, please make my heart steadfast on the deen. Because, yeah, the Rasul knew about these dynamics. So if we look at the right side of this slide, we can see the different components. Like we have, of course, the body, which is not in this picture, but the jasad, the body. Then we have the ruh, which is also not in this picture because it's the invisible reality, which you cannot put into a picture. And if we try to translate it into English, we have, of course, always an issue with translation, because trying to translate certain terminology of the Arabic into English can lead to confusion. I would prefer to translate the ruh as spirit, because the word soul is often also used for the nafs as a translation. And then you get confused by, like, are we talking about the spirit or are we talking about the soul in the sense of the self? So this can become a little bit confusing, and actually it's not that clear at all. There were great polymath Islamic scientists, scholars who actually had different opinions or different interpretations, different ways of how to use these terms of the nafs, the aql, the qalb. So they used it, for example, Imam al-Ghazali used the terms of the nafs and the qalb, sometimes like this, something like that. But, it's both. He meant both for the self. So, and the aql is, I translated here as wisdom, but you could also choose maybe intuition or, intelligence of the heart. Yeah, so many possibilities here, actually. So this is not hard science. So we'll be looking now into the dynamics of the nafs. And why? Because I was asked to tell something about stress, about, we're all stressed out in this time and age, but actually stress is very much, part of human life. And if we look at what is stated about the nafs in the Quran, then we can see at least 3 stages which are mentioned that our nafs can be in, and I'll mention them one by one. I'll explain them one by one. So the very first one is the nafs al-mutma'inna, mentioned in Surah al-Fajr. If you have learned it by heart, you've mentioned it often. Ya ayyatuha nafs al-mutma'inna, and meaning that is the tranquil soul. And this refers to, here you can see actually the English translation chooses the word soul for nafs. Yeah? So, O tranquil soul, O tranquil nafs, meaning this is the state where our nafs is very much in harmony with whatever comes her way, whatever comes on your path. If it's a pandemic, COVID-19, or if it's an exam you fail, or if it is an illness that you or your loved ones have, you stay in balance. Of course, you have emotions, you may feel sadness, you may cry, but you keep close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't lose track. You feel balanced. So that's the nafsul mutmainna. And this also means that this nafs, this stage where our nafs can be in, has submitted her own will fully to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's what it means when you accept your qadr, when you accept the trials that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on your path. If you fully accept that, really from within, not just by saying, ah, ya qadr Allah, but meanwhile really being fed up inside. No, that's not the tranquil soul, right? Then you're all, you feel that anxiety within. But the tranquil soul is really in peace with whatever comes his or her way. And we can, you can already hear from the way I explain it that this is a quite rare stage to be in general. This is not something that we are in for a stretch of days or weeks or months. It may come by sometimes, or you may have some days feeling like you can handle anything. uh, but it comes and goes. And once you've been there, you really long to be there again. And we really get inspired by looking at people who are in that stage. And of course, we can see that in many people from Palestine nowadays, that we marvel at their balance, we marvel at their inner tranquility. Amidst all the hardship and pain and tears, they're really having this sumut, this steadfastness. So that's really nafsul mutmainna, fully in acceptance. So then we are talking about the second stage, another stage of our nafs, and that is the nafs al-lawwama, mentioned in Surah Al-Qiyamah, where it said, and I do swear by the self-reproaching soul. And this is actually a stage where the nafs is where you are in a constant state of tauba, actually. And why? Because you are very, very much aware of your own shortcomings. You feel, you acknowledge, and you recognize that, oh, I've done it again. I shouldn't have been, shouting at my sister, or yelling at my kids, or well, whatever you you did that you're not that proud of, but okay, I'm only human. I will try, to say sorry, to make it up, to the istighfar, and tomorrow I'll try again. So this is really the self-reproaching soul, meaning very much aware of his humanness, and also quite okay with that very fact. So this is the stage where we are fully willing to look in the mirror, fully willing to admit our own shortcomings. And that is really not always that easy for us, because we do have our ego, that can really, try to look the other way, and or having a hard time admitting that you made a mistake, or having a very hard time after a fight to say sorry. Um, but we're working on it. You're working on it in this stage, in the nafs and lawama. You're trying to better yourself. You're trying to ask your best friend, like, am I really that bad? Am I really that egocentric? Or is that true, what they're saying? Or did you ever find me arrogant? Or you ask for the feedback, which is also quite rare to do. But if you really trust somebody, you can actually ask each other for feedback. And this is already really, amazing if you can do that in each relationship. It will bring enormous a growth, personal growth. If you can do that and you can be open, this nafs is also willing to receive feedback if somebody tries to, invite you to Islam. We hardly these days dare to do amal bil ma'ruf wa nahy al munkar to each other. We find it very difficult to invite each other to the right way and to point out those things that are not that great in our behavior that we shouldn't do. Yeah, and that's because many people have a hard time accepting critic. But the nafs lawama actually is seeing it as okay, this is the reality and I need to work on it. So already that's um, a very an accomplishment. We also know the people that are really not that great at self-reflection, but also not willing to see their part in the interaction. So they will always point at the other, right? They will always say like, "Oh, this has nothing to do with me. It's his or her fault. I'm not to blame. It's always the other one." And then you have a problem, of course, because you'll never grow. You'll never grow. And of course, it's also um, yeah, such a person also has a problem because. No, it's actually a short term a short term solution for not having to take your own responsibility for your part in the interaction. So then we come to the third stage, which is also described in the Quran, and that is nafs al ammaratu bisu. And this is the soul that is ever inclined to evil. And really, the context is fascinating from this ayah. It's from Surah Yusuf, alayhi salam, where you may all know his life story. It was really like a fantastic life story he had. As a young boy, he was put in the well. He was deserted by his brothers, half brothers, who were really very jealous. They were having hasad because their father, Yaqub alayhi salam, loved him so much, Yusuf alayhi salam. So they did away with him, and he was picked up by a caravan who thought he was just, good luck for them, just some piece of tijara, like trade, and they sold him on the slave market for a few dinar, and he ended up in the house of the Amir, which was the second mightiest person in Egypt in those days. So that was sorry, not Amir, Aziz. And the Aziz was like what you would call the Minister of Finance and Foreign Affairs together. Yeah, no, it's really, really powerful position. He came in that household. And Yusuf alayhi, when he grew up, he was tested in a special way, which shows us that a test can sometimes look very different than we expect. We also always expect a test to look ugly, right? Like a war or an illness. But Yusuf alayhi salam, as you may all know, was tested with beauty. And why was this a test for him? Because his boss, or actually the wife of the Aziz, his wife fell in love with him when he grew up to be a beautiful young man. And at one point in time, she invites him to commit zina. Now, there you go. This is the wife of your boss, your owner. She was there. He was like a slave there. He was treated very well, but still, you know, um, he was in a very vulnerable position. And she was the wife of the second mightiest person in the country. So yeah, if you refuse, it will end up bad for you. So it is really not that easy to say no. apart from that, she was a beautiful and very powerful woman. So this is a reason enough for men to say, okay, yeah. So he admitted at that very moment that he said, I do not seek to free myself from blame. He admitted that the soul is indeed ever inclined to evil, his soul as well. So this is for you and me really also a reminder that if Yusuf alayhi salam acknowledged that his soul was ever inclined to evil, who are we then to think that we don't have that inclination? We all have. So this is very important to acknowledge that there is no shame in that. It's just the way we were created. But then he mentions إلا ما رحم ربي إلا ما رحم ربي, except those shown mercy by my Lord, meaning that we do need our Creator to protect us in those moments that we are inclined to evil. And often, if we forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in those moments, we will follow and follow our inclinations. So he says we can only, resist those inclinations if we come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get that mercy. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for mercy and stay close. And then he says Allah is all forgiving, most merciful as well for those who did follow their inclinations. Yeah. So if of course we all do now and then. Yeah? So there's so much to learn from these three ayat, but you can imagine that looking at these three stages of our nafs, they are not static, they are constantly changing. It can be all three within an hour. um, and you can also imagine that you could discuss maybe later on as well, like, what is it for you that gives you the most stress? What stage of nafs, what situation is for you the most stressful? And of course, that would be somewhere between nafs lawama and al-maratu bisu. That really increases our anxiety. So if we look at stress from that Islamic perspective and we look at some of the sources, there are so many, but I just mentioned this hadith that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, remember often the destroyer of pleasure. And then he meant death. Do you know when he said this to his Sahaba, to his closest companions? He said this very remark at the moment that they were all having a good time, that they were maybe enjoying a dinner together, maybe having a laugh or two, maybe making some jokes. They were doing fine, they were having a good time. And then suddenly the Rasul would give them this reminder, meaning that if we can all enjoy, of course, ourselves every now and then, that's totally fine. But don't ever think that that's the norm. The norm is really the serious side of this life. No. And again, we do need sometimes to have fun, to enjoy ourselves, to seek some distraction. But we should never forget that that's the exception. Really, it's an exception to feel that everything is going fine, that nothing's the matter, that everything is, you smile all day. That's really an exception. So the norm, the sunnah of this dunya is really the serious side of life. And because, yeah, because of maybe the Western way of living, and for sure social media, it has been totally upside down. It's really, we all try to make each other believe that the sunnah of life is to have this huge smile on your face all the time, that you go from one surprise party to another fantastic trip to whatever great highlights you have in your life, and that all the time in between is just it doesn't matter that much, but it's exactly the other way around, right? And if we actually check in by ourselves, we know that, we feel that. But it's good to know that that's the Islamic perspective and reality about how should we feel. Is it normal to feel uh, stress or somber or anxiety? Is that actually normal, or is that something very special? No, it's actually normal, right? It's the sunnah of this life, of this dunya. And as well, this ayah from Surah Al-Ankabut says, do people think once they say we believe that they will be left without being put to the test? And this ayah is a very good reminder as well that we can really become upset when we try hard. We try to do our salawat, our prayers, or read Quran, or try to learn Arabic or whatever your attempts are to just be a good Muslim, and then still something comes our way. Still we are tested, and sometimes it makes us doubt that maybe either I'm not worth it, or maybe something's wrong with me, or maybe I'm doing it all wrong. I'm not good enough. Yeah. So this is really a form of waswas actually, that we're actually doing quite what we can, or maybe we can always do better, but maybe you're quite on the right track, and then there comes a test, and it can really be, the test can be really if it makes you start doubting what you're doing or not. So here we read that it is really something that we should expect. We should expect that we will be tested. And actually, in this ayah I didn't have on the slide, but there's also an ayah, I think it was in Surah Tawbah, where it's really promised that we will be tested once or twice every year, every period. So it's really a promise. And it shouldn't be such a big surprise every time we're tested, right? Like that's the exception. And because our first reaction when we're tested, when we have difficulties, is like how to get this fixed. How can we fix this? And how to get rid of, this being in a test. Um, it of course it's difficult. That's why it's called a test. But it's also good to know that actually the exception is to be outside of a test. Yeah, and that being in a test is should be more seen as the norm from an Islamic perspective. And these ayat, the very famous ayat from Surah Al-Baqarah, also explain to us what more to expect if talking and thinking about how we should feel, yeah? How our health, our mental health, our heart health, what we can expect from this life. And it's really important to learn a little bit about what we can expect. Otherwise, we'll be disappointed no matter what. If we believe that this life is all about having fun, and it should all everything should go smoothly, then of course you're up very very much upset when life happens. Because here in this ayah it says that we will certainly test you with some fear, some famine, loss of property, loss of life, loss of crops. You and I, we will all experience, it can be different for each one of us, right? But we will all be tested with some loss of life, because maybe you've already lost somebody close to you, but we were created in a cycle. So first our parents, then we, then our children, etc. So it's designed to experience the loss of somebody you love very much. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could for the same matter, have designed it otherwise, right? He could have chosen to let us be born all together at once, a bit crowded, but still, he could have chosen that and then let us die all at once. Then we would never have to endure the loss of a loved one, at least, yeah? But he didn't. So there is a wisdom in that, and there is this dynamics that is really something of this worldly life that is very normal, and we can expect that it comes our way. And then there's immediately the recipe for how to deal with that in general. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. So give good news to those who patiently endure, and who will say when struck by disaster, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Now this is a sentence, what is in most cultures, Islamic cultures, only used when somebody dies. But actually here is the advice and the guidance that we should use this saying whenever we feel that we are in a trial, that we should say Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and really ponder upon its meaning. Really ponder upon its meaning, and then it will give you a sense of tranquility amidst of a calamity. And it's promised to that if we can actually manage at the first stroke of a calamity to say Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, then you will feel really the blessings and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come over you. You can see clearly the difference when, for example, somebody, to take the clear example, somebody dies, and you have, for example, the mother dies, and you have two sisters. And one sister, she starts screaming and yelling and pulling her hair out and crashing to the ground and really in total hysteria. She will eventually come by, but it will take her so much longer and will be such a more difficult way back to balance than the other sister who actually gets hit by that surprise as well, but she will say in the moment, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It will balance her immediately, and it will give her really a rope to hold on to during the trial, and she will be less off track. She will be sooner on track. So firstly, stress is the norm. Stress because of loss, we should really remind ourselves that everything is an amana anyway. It is really, our whole bodies are really an amana. Because it's only like a gift from Allah Ta'ala during this worldly life. Our eternal part will travel on. Our ruh, our spirit, was here before this life. During this life, it fuses temporarily, and you get the gift of your body. But it will travel on once you leave your body dies, is worn out, or whatever, and then your eternal part will travel on. So that's really the core, the ruh. And if there's something happening to your body, then, or to a body of a loved one, somebody gets ill, or you come in an accident or something, it of course it's a great trial if you become handicapped, or may Allah all preserve us from that. But if it happens, we should remember ourselves that it was an amana from Allah anyway. It already belonged to Allah, and he just decided to take it back. And of course, this was a very beautiful, comforting saying by one of the brothers who was talking to a little girl in Palestine who lost her leg, and he was actually explaining to her this very concept, like, okay, your leg was from Allah, right? And she said yes. Like, he decided to take that leg back at this moment. So, don't worry, he already took your leg back, but you have your other leg still. And so he was talking like that, and the girl was really calming down, because that concept is really very comforting. It's very strong, and it makes you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also very, very much. He loves us, he cares for us, so, and he decided to take some of your body back. Okay, that's his right. It was his in the first place. Yeah. So, and stress because of the future. Well, the easy, this simple recipe is let it go. Of course, in practice, it's not that easy at all. But this is the short solution. Like, okay, it does lie in Allah's hands. So let me try to stay in the present time and not constantly escaping in my mind towards the future, because the future we don't know, and it will, yeah, we don't even know if we will be around. So going to the, because of the time, moving on to the mental health toolkit, the inner dialogue. So the left part is like the worrying thoughts we can all struggle with. We can have um, like, for example, if you believe that your life should always be fun, and you say you hate stress, then if some stressful event comes your way, you really become out of balance. It will hit you very hard. Whilst if you have this fundamental attitude or fundamental mindset, really, that life is supposed to be stressful, that life is a testing place, and of course that we are not dropped on this earth without any guidance how to deal with the calamities, how to deal with difficulties. We have so many tools given to us as well, hand in hand with the hardship. We have so many tools from Quran and Sunnah to deal with this. But if that's your mindset, like life is a testing place, it will hit you less hard if you are tested. So the second thought you can have is, if I work hard enough, I will succeed. And this is actually very common thoughts, and it may be very well be the way you were brought up, and the way your parents raised you. Many of you are here from abroad, from far away, as just was mentioned in the beginning, and you're not here only for fun, also for fun, but you want to build a future, right? You want to work hard. And the message that if you work hard enough, you will succeed is a very common one. But still, if you do like a double master's, you go for the PhD, you go really, you give it your all, and then suddenly you become ill. Or suddenly your mother needs you, she's ill, you need to move back and you need to take care of her. You have to, skip college, drop it all. Things happen, and that's life. And because of that, it may be that either you cannot finish your studies, or you have to choose another direction in life, or you have delay. And then if you still believe that it is, you can achieve anything if you work hard enough, and you didn't succeed, yeah, then there's only one person who is to blame for that failure, and that's you. And that's a very tough burden to bear. Actually, that's why many young people and more students as well really burn out very early, because they think they have to, build their own future. They think they can do anything if they work hard enough, and they work hard. But then if they don't succeed because of life, things happen, then they think, wow, I failed, which is not fair at all on yourself. Because if you would have had the mindset like, okay, I do my best, but actually that's all I can do, and the results is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. It's not the results that are my business. Actually, it's really out of our reach. We think we we can influence the results, but we will not. If you want to To understand this concept, you can picture yourself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At one point in time, we will all be standing there, yeah? And He will be asking you, He will not ask you, why didn't you have all straight A's? But He will ask you, did you do your best? Did you invest your time? Did you read the books or study? Or did you just have a lot of fun or, or partying all the time? He will ask us about the process. He will not ask us about if we, had straight A's or if we had that diploma or if we had that master or whatever the results. He will ask you about the process, and that's what counts. Very important mindset. And the third mental health tool is the misconception is if I make a mistake, I'm a failure. And it's really together with the fourth one, like I'm worthless or I'm a failure, I'm stupid. It's really something that you are not born with. There's not a baby on this world that comes here and that arrives in the dunya and says, wow, I'm worthless. What, stupid, or, meaning this is often, if you think this, if you have this mindset, and actually I have many clients who are struggling with this mindset, it's always something that you learned from your environment and you incorporate it as your own. And after a while, you think it's you who just made up that thought, but it's not you. It's your environment. Often one of your parents, sometimes a grandparent who have been telling you that you should do perfect, otherwise you're a failure, for example. So we really need to correct that mindset to become more balanced and to stay balanced throughout trials that come our way, for sure. So mindset, I make mistakes because I was created that way, will be so much more helpful. Recognizing that you're human and not an angel. And this may sound very obvious, but some people behave like they think they should be an angel, meaning flawless, perfect, not able to disobey, because an angel is created in that it cannot disobey. So we could say that's not such of an achievement for an angel to obey because it was created that way. But you and I, we are created differently. We can actually choose with our hearts, to move upwards to Allah, to obey, to submit our will to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we can choose to give in to those inclinations of the nafs al-ammara. And then if we are vulnerable, or maybe having a bad day, or maybe having already some sadness because of another event, then Shaitan, throws his waswasa, his whisperings, also on top of that. So he's trying to drag us towards the inclinations of the nafs al-ammara. And we have so many tools to protect ourselves from those waswasa, but often we forget or we don't practice them. So we should also, fill our toolkit with those tools, how to protect yourself. So, and then the fourth one is if you're haunted with the idea that I'm worthless or I'm not lovable or I'm stupid, because you've just heard that too many times in your life, then try to embrace the mindset that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks that you are worthy. And that's already the only thing we actually need to embrace the thought that, okay, then who am I to think that I'm not worthy if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks that I'm worthy? And we have the proof there for that in the Quran. And as a species, as a creation, he let the angels bow for Adam alayhi salam. Not because we should be arrogant because of that fact, no, but just because as a creation we are in a higher higher place if we behave with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Adam alayhi salam was given that knowledge. So, and I think this is the last slide. Yeah. Also a slide for you, just some tips for you how to interact with your loved ones, your friends, your classmates, because mental health, maybe you're fine, but there may be somebody close by that is not doing fine. And often we don't know because we are champions in putting on our masks of mask of like, I'm fine, I'm doing great, or alhamdulillah. And we need some tools as well to help each other sometimes. Yeah. And then left, there are some sayings that are often, used within the Muslim community, but may be very counterproductive. And I call this toxic positivism, because the intention is very well meant. I always have husnul dhan, but it can be really, if you, for example, let's say that you have an issue and you really, want to discuss it with somebody, but it's not that easy, and you really have had 3 days a stomach ache because you're nervous about sharing it with your best friend, and then one day you decide, okay, I'm gonna tell her, and you share whatever you have, and then your friend says, oh, you should say alhamdulillah, it's just, look at the people in Palestine, what are we complaining about? Or, what you should do, why don't you read a little bit more Quran, and try to do some qiyam al-layl? Really, it will, it will vanish whatever you carry. You already feel, and often we hear this from also the older generation, that, parents can be really, they love us, and um, they love us unconditionally often, but they can also, do this toxic positivism. They will maybe say, oh, wait, why don't you read the Quran? They want the best for you, but meanwhile, you feel very much, um, uh, very lonely. Because at that very moment that you hear those advices, of course, you know that already. It's nothing new. And the whole problem is that you just poured out your heart. You took up all your courage. You poured out your heart, and nobody's actually saying anything about how you feel. So you're bypassing the emotions. So this is also emotional bypassing. And that is really, it can be very dangerous, because once you did this, and you have this experience that somebody, give you these simple advices, then you think, okay, that was once, but never again. And then we lose touch. And then somebody, maybe there was a classmate, and somebody, he or she doesn't show up anymore. And you think, oh, well, I haven't seen her a long time ago. But you lose touch of each other. And sometimes it goes wrong, So what helps is actually to say, if you're wondering, what can I do then? I know somebody who actually, she doesn't come to college anymore, and I don't know why, but I don't know, what can I say? I don't want to interfere. You don't want to, force yourself upon somebody, but you can actually do something for each other. You can always offer help. You're like, is there anything I can do for you? You can just mention your observations. Like, I noticed that you haven't come to college for many weeks now. How are you? Yeah? Or maybe you've seen that person, but no, he or she was looking very pale or worried, not rested. We can say, like, okay, I see that you're worried, or could it be that you are worried? Yeah, am I right? Just checking in with each other. And if the person is not prepared or not willing or to talk with you, it will be soon become clear. But it may create an opening towards each other, and just mentioning what you see of the emotion. And this is really emotional intelligence, what we and you and I, we are not trained in this. And we should all actually have this as a subject at school, I think, at high school, for example, because we should be trained to be more emotionally intelligent, meaning that we just reflect the emotion we see at the face of another, or the impression you have, and you check, is that right? I feel that it seems that you're a bit sad today. Am I feeling that right? And then you drop this silence. And we also are very bad at dropping silences, because we all feel a bit uneasy with silences. But actually, you drop a silence and you see if there is any reaction, verbally or non-verbal. Yeah. And then you can see if it creates an opening for connection. I could go on for hours about this. So this is just one slide if you are interested in my, it's in Dutch. I have this free inspiratieboekje with some tips now and then you are on my email list. If you are interested, you can scan this. And that was it for today. So I'll close my presentation. Stop sharing now. I can see one reaction in the chat. I don't know.
I think at the beginning someone had a problem with the sound.
Oh,
Let me stop the
okay. Well, that's
recording.
fixed. I'm not from the technical department.